In this lesson, we will cover recognizing hosted and non-hosted air terminals, placing air terminals at the correct location, and adjusting room calculation points. In this model, air terminals have not been placed. We will place some air terminals of various types in these exam rooms. Currently, we're looking at a floor plan view. Typically, air terminals are best placed in reflected ceiling plan views if they're going to be in the ceiling. If they're sidewall or another type, maybe even floor-based, then you could place them in a floor plan view. But in this case, we'll use a reflected ceiling plan view. That way we can see the ceiling grid. To place air terminals, on the Systems ribbon, in the HVAC panel, click Air Terminal. This activates the Air Terminal tool, and the first thing you should do is select the type of air terminal you want to place from the type selector. In this model, I've loaded several different types of air terminals. As you can see, some are hosted and some are not hosted. Let's begin by discussing the hosted and non-hosted. So if I select one of the hosted types, I'll do a 12 by 12 inch. You'll notice that there's a cannot place symbol unless I hover over a wall, and that's because there's a placement panel in the contextual ribbon and place on vertical face is currently selected. In this case, I have a 12 by 12 ceiling hosted component, and so I need to make sure that place on face is selected. And then I can hover over a ceiling and then click to place it. So remember a couple things here. If there is a placement panel in the contextual ribbon, that means that the family was created as a face-based family. If it was created as a ceiling-based or even a wall-based, then it would not work with a linked model. The walls or the ceilings would need to be in the host model. So when on the MEP side, we typically work with linked architectural models, and so we need to make sure that those families are created as face-based. When that's the case, you can simply move over a ceiling and click and place that air terminal in the ceiling. If you do not like to use hosted air terminals, you can use unhosted air terminals. And so when we scroll through the list here, we can see that there's the supply diffuser, 24 by 24 face, 12 by 12 connection. This is an unhosted air terminal, and we can see that because we can click to place it anywhere, and there's no placement panel. And so we can set the level parameter here and then the elevation from level. And in this case, I'm not exactly sure what the ceiling height is, and so we can take a guess. We'll say 9 feet. And when I move it off of the ground floor, when I change this elevation from level parameter, you can now see it underneath the cursor. And so it's in the view range of this reflected ceiling plan view. And now we can really click anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a ceiling. It can be anywhere because this is an unhosted air terminal. And so I'll simply click anywhere to place it, and then I'll click Modify to end the command. Some people really like to use hosted air terminals, and when I select that, you can see that there is a host parameter, and it is the linked architectural model. The problem with that is that in the architectural model, if this ceiling is removed, then that hosted air terminal will become an orphaned component. And so even if they create a ceiling of the same type in the exact same place, it will be an orphaned component. The non-hosted components are pretty flexible, and so they do not rely on the linked model. And so in this case, I select it, and you can see that there's the level is ground floor, and then the host is ground floor, and I can really use either of these to control the height. There's also you see that it's not aligned in the ceiling grid, and so I can use the align tool. We'll do that real quick, and we will line it up with the ceiling grids here. So that's the way you can quickly align it. And then I can select it, and if you don't like to see these arrows, these are typical in the out-of-the-box air terminal families. And so I can deselect these instance parameters here in the properties palette and remove those. And then let's create a section view and take a look here at where our air terminal is. And so we guessed correctly, and we're right here in the ceiling. If you needed to, you could move that up or down once again with these parameters. Let's also take a look back at our floor plan view, and you can see the air terminals here. And also, if I select the space and I scroll down to the mechanical flow parameters, you can see that the actual supply airflow now has a value. And that is because air terminals are placed in the space. We have 500 CFM here and 175 CFM in the hosted air terminal, which gets us to our actual supply airflow of 675 CFM. If those values were not reporting correctly, if the actual supply airflow parameters was not taking into account the air terminals, then it's likely because the room calculation point is in the wrong spot. Or maybe the air terminals are placed slightly above the space. And so in order to correct that, you can use the room calculation point. And so that can be adjusted in the family. So I'll select the air terminal and click Edit Family. And we will open the air terminal in the Family Editor. And in the Properties palette, you'll notice the room calculation point parameter. When I enable that and I orbit around, you can see this point here. And so since this is an air terminal, I want this room calculation point to be below the air terminal. And so let's say it was placed slightly above the ceiling and this was a good couple feet down, then it would be recognized in the space. Now in this case, it's already calculating like I want it to, so I'm not going to load it back in. So I'll switch back over to our project, and we're in the reflected ceiling plan view. Let's do one more thing. Let's activate the air terminal tool, and let's click Load Family. And we will navigate to the default family library, Mechanical, MEP, Airside Components, Air Terminals. And I'm going to select the Supply Diffuser - Sidewall and click Open to load that family. And the Specify Types dialog opens. And you can see here that there are hundreds of types, it appears. And the reason that this dialog appears is because all the types were created in a type catalog. That way, every single type does not load when you load this family. So you can use Control or Shift to select multiple air terminals or multiple air terminal types and then click OK, and those will be loaded into the project. And in this case, these are non-hosted components. And so if we want to place these in the sidewall, we'll place them at 8 feet. And now I can click. I can use spacebar to rotate it, and then I can click where I want it to be if we want to place it in this wall here. Click Modify. And then lastly, let's just take a look at it real quick in our section view. And we have a rather large sidewall, and so we probably want to change that to a smaller one. And that's how we can place air terminals in the ceiling and also in the sidewalls.